This is the Authority Company Podcast, conversations with leaders who are designing our future. Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and my old friend Benjamin Douglas is here today. We're talking about turning workplaces from disconnected to committed through people, purpose, and trust. Now, full disclosure, Ben and I both work for the same company, Advantage Media, but there's nobody I know with more experience in human resources and leadership. Ben's the author of the new book, Mediocre to Meaningful, a business parable about elevating people, purpose, and performance. The book uses story to show how small leadership choices shape culture, belief, and results. Ben Douglas, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Great. How are you doing today?
I'm excellent, Ben. Thanks for joining me today. And so I want to talk about something at the jump that I talked to a lot of people in the sort of HR, culture, people space, and that's the idea of folks surviving at work as opposed to thriving at work. And you frame this story around people moving from surviving the work to caring about work. When did you first realize many places just settled for survival?
Absolutely. I've been working in HR about 25 years at this point, and overall, I've seen a lot of situations organizationally where people struggle, and there are some real trends there as to why people struggle, and real trends in places where people thrive. And so, what I've tried to do with the book is really bring some of those things to light in a narrative form, so it's a little bit easier to digest. So as you work through, you're able to really understand the concepts, application of some of those concepts as you're working through, so that people really understand from a leadership perspective, how to be a good intentional leader that helps people find meaning in what they do.
And that meaning piece, I think, is important because if you think about it, these companies I described that are surviving, not thriving, could be successful. Like they could be hitting all their projections, making all the money they're supposed to. They're doing all these things, but inside, the people are just not feeling great. So how can leaders recognize that? I think that's important because I think again, most leaders are very much black and white. How do those numbers look at every month, every quarter, every year? But there's not much nuance in numbers, as you know, Ben. So how can leaders be more intentional in terms of picking up on the idea of folks not just surviving but thriving?
Absolutely. The interesting thing about organizations is it is hardly ever the business plan, the strategy, macroeconomic environment, any of those things that get in the way of a company being successful. It's actually a lot of times how people are managed across the board. It's culture, it's process, it's a lot of the things we talk about in the book. And in looking at those things kind of across the board, you really need to go through a process to understand what's getting in the way. And what I've done in the book is I've really taken a process of going through and listening to people and understanding their needs in what they need to do to really focus in on what's getting in the way between what they do each and every day and how to have that work be meaningful and impactful at the end of the day. And really, the process to get there is typically right in front of leadership. It's generally in how you interact with people, how you manage people, how you support people. And I'll tell you, in the book, there are as is all books, right? There are sections of the book. The introduction, which is kind of a letter to the reader, and the epilogue, both those things, I'll tell you, are money. They are really laying out the philosophy and guiding light for my overall approach to leadership. And I think if you take the principles that are in those places in the book, and of course the middle book's good too, but if you take the stuff that is at the ends of the book and apply that, you're going to understand very quickly that it's not difficult. It's being intentional that really drives success in a lot of places. And people want to come in. I genuinely believe people want to come in. They want to do good work, that they want to be successful at what they do. People don't just show up to work and say, I'm going to screw everything up today. That generally doesn't happen, right? So people want to be successful, and where people get in the way, where leaders get in the way, is they they don't give those people that work for them the autonomy, the voice in the middle of their situation to really drive toward success. And so that's really key. Listening well, not just listening, but hearing people, understanding their needs in their work, and really giving them the ability to just do what they need to do in their job to be successful.
And what I mentioned in the intro and the middle part that you're talking about is a parable. You decided to go with a parable structure as opposed to a traditional business book, which you probably could have written as well. Why was it important to tell this story like this in parable form?
Well, one, I love business parables. It's my favorite type of business book. So when I was thinking about how I wanted to put the book together, just naturally went there. And so really love stories, really love watching characters come to life in the middle of that. And so how do you take, 25 years worth of experience and cram it all into one story? Of course, that's what we attempted to do in the book, but really, having the story come to life and show you the principles in action, I think is pretty powerful. So that you're not, as a leader, as a manager, you're not wondering how that could actually work. You read a lot of business books, and inside those business books, a lot of wisdom, but a lot of times you have to take those principles, concepts, and think through, okay, how do I take what I'm learning, reading, and apply it to what we do each and every day? And I've tried to kind of fill in the gaps there for a little bit for people as we work through.
And the main character is Peter, right? And he listens before changing anything. And you talk about the listening piece that you were going into a little bit. But I'm curious, why does listening feel threatening to many leaders? And the reason I bring this up is because I wonder, do leaders have a listening scorecard where they're like, if I listen too much, I'm a pushover. If I don't listen at all, I'm a tyrant. That sort of the in between the two of those seems like it could be very difficult because of the nuance involved. How does a leader tread that water in terms of not being the pushover and not being the tyrant? And the way Peter plays out in the parable.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are some real insecurities with managers and leaders across the board in organizations. They feel like if they can't bring all of the answers to the table themselves, that they're somehow falling short. They're not smart enough to be in their role. And when you look at and experience real authentic leadership in some places, which I know we both have throughout our lives, what you see is you see people that listen well, and they take the opportunities they have in front of them. They surround themselves with great people, and really take the collective wisdom of the organization, really leverage that for the good of everyone. And that's what Peter does inside the book. He listens first, and that's a principle that I learned very early on in my career in HR. You start there. You start to give people a voice in what they do, and from that you're able to make positive change. If you're focused on creating positive culture, but you're not listening to the people you're trying to create a culture for, then what are you doing? Right? It just wouldn't make any sense. It's like you're trying to build the equation to a math problem, and you don't have all the components of what you need to do the answer to that. Right? So you're really focused in on understanding what the target is, and then working to bridge the gap for that target, so you build in a very intentional way.
That's great. And I wonder too if leaders have to struggle with being too easily influenced. I remember a leader told me a funny story once that he said the worst day for his employees was not Monday or after holiday break. It's that first day when the leader returns from their vacation because they don't know what book he read while they were on vacation. What new project or what kind of strategy was he going to implement because he just read this book, this best, he might have been the latest Benjamin Douglas bestseller, but what is it, what do you tell to a leader about someone who maybe like after reading your book or reading a book, be like, oh, I love this. I gotta implement this into my everyday. How do you advise leaders when it comes to that, when it comes to a fresh idea that's introduced to them and how quickly they integrate it to their company?
Yeah, and I think all a lot of great leaders have shiny object syndrome, right? They listen to something, they read something, and all of a sudden, you've shifted your entire strategic plan because you thought that would be the magical thing that makes all the difference in the world. One of the things I will tell you about Mediocre to Meaningful, this is a crock pot program. We are not in the business of working quickly to build culture. This is a very slow, intentional process. And as you look at what Peter does in the book, he listens to everyone across the board, multiple shifts, in order to get collective wisdom and perspective from the entire whole of the organization. Because what's good for one person isn't necessarily good for the rest of the team. And so you absolutely have to have the wisdom and discernment to create a balanced perspective as you're looking at culture to make sure that you're delivering something that's good for the greater good of the entire team that you're working with.
Nice, nice. Yeah, we've all known those leaders with the who like the shiny things. But you mentioned earlier about managers, and it's kind of weird because over the last couple years, there's almost become a negative connotation to the word manager. Like you're seeing all these books and think pieces. Don't be a manager, be a leader. But you write about in the book about managing from the middle. What pressure do middle leaders face that executives often miss? Because sort of like they're not like the generals. They're like the sergeant and the captains, in the battle zone. They're not, they're seeing everything that the people in the C-suite or the generals or commanders and chiefs don't see. Tell me about that part of it.
Absolutely. People in the middle of the organization are actually my favorite leaders, people that are both managing, people that are doing the work, having the most impact, having interactions with clients, customers, all of those kinds of things. But they also face some unique challenges in that they are trying to manage up as best they can and trying to be diplomatic, trying to deliver things that may or may not be possible in some really challenging situations. And you have to really balance all of those things. But I can tell you that really having middle leaders have a good, strong vision around what the organization is trying to do and how they can pull everyone into that vision and deliver for the team at large is really key. It's all about purpose for the work that you're doing, all about alignment, and all about making sure that all of those things really have integrity from the bottom of the organization all the way to the top. And you, as a middle manager, you may not do things in the way that a senior leader would, but to deliver the results that they're looking for, which are always focused in on just the organizational metrics, as well as the things that you would look for at the end of the day with revenue, profit, and all of those things, is really key and ideal. But in the middle of that, if you give those middle leaders autonomy in their role, empower them to make good decisions for the people in the organization, it may not be done exactly how you would want it to be done as a senior leader, but they're going to get there. They're going to deliver the results you're looking for at the end of the day, which I think is what everyone's after.
Well, Ben, you know that I am not a big fan of the check the box culture because to me, I was like, there's more than just the check. There's, was that check done well and all the stuff that goes in. But managers kind of have to live by that first, right? Like their role is to make sure those boxes are checked. How do they carry that on, but create a culture that also makes it more than just the box? Like almost in a way, it's almost like a sleight of hand. Like, how do you have this role of being the check boxer chief, but also being a leader?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I've learned throughout my career is a lot of times the hard part that middle management has is you're sitting there trying to check all the boxes and, it's always an endless list of all the things you have to do. But where middle management falls short in a lot of cases is they don't take time to explain and help others understand why the boxes are important in the first place. And so once you get some alignment around why those things are important and what we get for the organization, for the team, whatever, when those boxes are checked, when you have alignment, you have really good understanding of how that is done. And also you give people the, again, autonomy, the voice in the middle of this situation so they understand not only what's important, but get to buy in to the how and the why of how something plays out, that becomes really important. And most of the time, the work itself isn't as important as how the work is done and that people had a say in how it's done. And that's a really critical differentiation because giving people the ability to weigh in to their destiny, kind of how all those things are done at a company matters a great deal, no matter what job people are doing. And a lot of times that can make all the difference in the world.
Awesome. Now, we talked about listening earlier, but the story that highlights the importance of honest feedback as care. And I'm sure we've all read or seen the books about radical candor. Netflix is famously known for that. But tell me about that kindness piece when it comes to feedback, because I think for many leaders that's hard because again, it's probably a trained skill set, or maybe it's maybe nature versus nurture. Maybe they're just kind in general, but they have to learn it. So tell me about how you could be kind when it comes to giving feedback without taking the teeth out of it. Because at the end of the day, you want people to take away from the feedback, but don't soften it so much that once it's done, the person's like, I guess I'm all right.
Right. Absolutely. I always say that you need to be candid with people because being candid is a kindness on its own, but you need to be candid with compassion. So as you're working with people, as you're delivering a message that it may be a little bit tougher, uh, not sharing truth with people is wrong. You absolutely have to tell people the truth. You absolutely need to tell people the truth about their performance so that they understand where they're at, they understand where they need to go, and leaders need to help people bridge the gap between the two. I'll tell you, in my life in HR, I would say 90% of all situations that I have experienced and seen and witnessed throughout my life, they are because there is a disconnect in communication and how people are talking about the performance of the team, both individually and as a whole. When you tell people the truth about performance and you tell them how they can improve and you are clear about what you're looking for, people will naturally try to gravitate to hitting the targets that you lay out for them. But it's when you're not clear, it's when you don't tell them the truth, when you're not compassionate in that way, the people don't have the tools to be successful. And so, what do leaders expect in that situation? Do they really think people are just going to haphazardly find their way to the right solution? Maybe, sometimes that happens. And, thankful because, corporate America would not be near as successful if we didn't have some of that. But overall, there is a better way, and having clear communication, clear standards, and direction for performance with an individual and with groups of people, that is really important to make sure that things move in the right direction.
One of the things you see with leaders, they'll take on the persona of the cheerleader, and I think like any cheerleader, there's only so much of it you could take. Like if you if you were to go watch a cheerleader perform for like 20 minutes, after about 10, you're like, "Whew, that's enough." And I think the same goes for business because if a leader is too much of a cheerleader, and then like they're saying, "Hey, this group's doing great," and then people around like they're not doing that great. Why are they saying that? So how does a leader be a cheerleader, but without it coming across as phony or truthful to people? Because people on the ground are probably be like, why is he saying that that's great? Because we all know it's not.
Yeah, absolutely. You definitely have to live in reality. And I think part of being an authentic leader is somebody that has a balanced approach to leadership. There will be going to be times where the team does a fantastic job and people and teams need to be rewarded for that. And there are times where, you're going to set aggressive goals and teams are going to fall short. And I think it's okay to call that out and tell people like, we fell short, and here's what happened. And what do we learn from this? I think that's really important. What did we learn? What would we have done differently? how is that really going to define what we do in the future? And so to have those conversations is definitely ideal. But the thing I will tell you, not everything you're going to do in life is going to be easy. I would even say that some of the most meaningful things you're going to do are going to be pretty difficult. Business is not easy. Life is not easy. Relationships are not easy. There's a lot of just natural challenges in the middle of that. But what I'm trying to ask people and compel people toward in the book is it is worth making hard decisions for the right things. It is worth giving people an opportunity to find purpose in their work, to work in a great culture, and to find meaning.
That's great. And you write about trust as something built through follow through. What do you think destroys trust faster than leaders expect?
I would say, what erodes trust faster than anything is people not being able to count on someone to get something done. So it really is that follow through, follow up, making sure that the communication is intact. Because if people can't count on me to get my work done or to support them in the way that they would expect, then what use do they have for me as a leader, as a coach, as a mentor? It really starts to crumble and fall short. So giving people just the fundamental, like you can count on me perspective helps to really bridge many gaps, and it also helps to really insulate those situations that may not be as ideal. So if you have situations where you've got a lot of challenges in business. So if you've got situations that may not work out the way that you assumed that they would, you give people a little bit of latitude because they trust you and they know that the intent that you had in the middle of whatever the situation is positive. That you wanted the best for them. And I think that does a lot for people. And it's really all part of that just building process in relationships inside of a business.
No, that's great. And it's funny. One of the phrases that make me cringe when people say it is they'll say our team is small but mighty, and it's very cringy because it's like, first of all, no one ever talks like that. But secondly, this idea of like doing more with less, which your book challenges. Why does that phrase damage culture so quickly? This idea of do more with less.
Yeah, I think small but mighty is it's talking about being understaffed. It's
Right.
pretty much what that's all about. But I think that in order to give people time and space to do good work, you have to have balance in what they do. You have to have the right amount of people for the work that's at hand. And when you don't, there are a lot of challenges. And you do start to have culture erode in some places because people aren't able to do the things that they would need to do. I think people need time to think. I think people need a time to process things, to think of better solutions. My book takes place in a manufacturing plant in the rural Midwest because that's where I'm from, and I'm pretty familiar with that environment. And so overall, when you're looking at a manufacturing plant, when you don't have time to think through processes, add in improvements, and do all the things that really lead to better outcomes and more efficiencies, then you really have people just going through the motions every day. And you see that in lots of places, especially in a manufacturing environment, because people will just come in every day, they clock in for 8 hours, 10 hours, they do the work that you have charged them to do, and then they go clock out. The the worst thing you could have in that situation is somebody that is a unthinking worker that is in the middle of that situation because you haven't invited them to think about what they do and their process and how that might be different. And asking those questions of that individual, giving that person an identity in the middle of your business, that could mean everything to them. And so giving them the ability to really contribute on that level, it really changes the nature of the work that they do.
Hmm. And your book's a bestseller. People are gravitating towards it. One of the things that you talked about at the top was like, you don't want this to be a book that's going to like change things overnight. It's, small bites that people can sort of implement into what they do. So readers of the book are more likely leaders, and those leaders are dealing with teams that have to deal with deadlines, and pressure, right? What's a small little step that maybe to take away from the book or a lot of stuff you write about that leaders could try now when it comes to the stresses of working with a team that's under pressure, under deadlines?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I tell people, and I've been in a lot of situations throughout my life and career where I've gone into challenging organizational situations and I've been asked to help to turn those around. I spent a good deal of my life, especially in the first 5 to 10 years of HR, doing that. And overall, it would always be the same thing. I go in typically with a team of people, I listen. I hear people. I hear about the challenges they have, the things that they would change if they were given the power to make changes. I listen to the things that they would need from a process perspective, from a tool perspective, whatever that might be. And I listen to the collective wisdom of the organization before you make changes. And overall, there are some fundamental things about businesses that you want to make sure are right. And so you want to make sure that the place is right, that they have the ability to come into a place where they can trust in the fundamental things that would need to be there, that it's a safe environment, that it is something that they can count on, that you have the right people at the right times in the right places, and above that, you have the right processes in place. If you can solve the culture, the people, the processes of a business, then you solve 85-90% of the challenges. We can talk about business plans, we can talk about strategy all day long, and there are people a lot smarter than I that you could go ask those questions. But I'm telling you right now, from my perspective, culture wins every day. And if you can have culture and have people interact with the right culture in the right way, it's pretty powerful, and it can take you through a lot of challenges in the business because what you essentially do, it's almost a law of numbers. Going into an organization, if I'm trying to turn it around, I'm one person and I might be working with 100 other people. If I can get those other 100 people working in the same direction that I'm trying to work, how much more powerful is that? How much more powerful is it that I can have 100 people doing the things that I would want to have them do when I'm not even there? And you have all of that momentum if you can get people going in the right direction that will carry you through and will provide the organization and the leadership in it, including all those at the top, at the senior leadership level. It would be providing the results that they're looking for.
Wow, it's good stuff. I'd love to ask you about, in terms of like once the book is someone's read it, and there was this phrase that got overused in 2025 that I hope in 26 gets left behind is being comfortable with the uncomfortable. It just again made me cringe a little bit because it's like, I mean, I know what people are trying to say and they think they're clever, but I think people just said it too many times. But the reason I bring it up is, what do you hope for leaders makes them feel uncomfortable in a good way when reading your book?
Yeah, I think everyone is looking for a magic wand that they can wave, a book that they can read, something that they can do, and listen to that will like revolutionize their business and will cause everyone inside whatever the organization is to be super wealthy or whatever. There's always a want in situations to have people have just quick wins, and some of those things that I see and hear and watch people try to do just aren't realistic. I think the thing that I would have people understand is that, true, authentic leadership is about doing all of the small things well that add up to, big impact at the end of the day. It is not rocket science. A lot of this stuff, I would say, even in the book, is what I would consider to be common sense, and I'm perfectly okay with that. And as they say, common sense isn't quite so common anymore. But overall, good leaders showing up to work every day and leading well and doing right by their people, makes all the difference in the world. And we need more of that in this world. And so if I could encourage leaders in any way, it would be, show up, do the right thing, take care of your people, and your people will take care of you. I know we've all heard that, but that is absolutely true.
That's great. Ben, I always wrap up these conversations taking folks behind the dedication of the book. And if anyone knows Benjamin Douglas, knows they know you're this HR guru, you know how to handle teams. But the one thing, first and foremost, is you're a family man. And you've dedicated the book to your beloved Amber, whose humor brightens my day, whose mind inspires me, whose kindness warms my soul, and whose spirit sets me free. Tell me why it was so important. And again, people know, family's number one for Ben Douglas, but why was it important for you to dedicate the book to Amber?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you asking about that. There's certain relationships in life that define you as a human, and Amber and I, that relationship is absolutely one of those. She has changed who I am, and I'm forever grateful for that. And so, love her dearly. So grateful for everything that we have, relationally and otherwise, and really love that I was able to dedicate the book.
Awesome. His name is Benjamin Douglas. The book, Mediocre to Meaningful, a business parable about elevating people, purpose, and performance. Ben, thanks so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
And that's going to do it for this episode. If you want to find out more information about Ben and our other amazing authors, go to theauthoritycompany.com.